Hi, how does the technology of the world around us shape us in terms of what it means for us to be human? Isaac Asimov wrote the Foundation series, and in that, there is a particular aspect of how technology shapes our poetic sensibility. The Foundation series is set up in a planet called Trantor. What is interesting about Trantor is that it's a space where the whole planet is encased in this sphere that human beings have built, and they're living inside of it in a way that is very energy efficient, and it houses 40 billion people. Because the whole planet is encased in a sphere, nobody in Trantor can see the world outside, the sun or the moon. So it poses the question of what does it mean to live in a space where you don't have access to the open skies, where you're completely enclosed. We see this planet from the eyes of a young mathematician called Gal Dorney, who's coming into Trantor and sees a beautiful setting sun and admiring the beauty of it. At that point, he meets somebody called Gerald, who makes an interesting observation about Trantor. Gerald tells him, Trantor gets you if you've got the poetic temperament. What does he mean by that? What is meant by poetic temperament? Why does Trantor destroy this poetic temperament? The poetic temperament is not about trying to be a poet and writing poetry like Shakespeare or something of that sort. The poetic temperament is our ability for wonder. It's our sensitivity to transcendence, to experience something of beauty that draws us from our own preoccupation into a bigger world out there. So that is the poetic temperament. So what gets in the way of this poetic temperament? In the poem called Lamina, John Keats has a sense of an answer to this question. He says, cold philosophy will clip an angel's wings. And what he means by cold philosophy here is not philosophy in the sense of Plato and Aristotle, rather philosophy in the sense of a very materialistic, reductionistic way of thinking. He says cold philosophy, this materialistic way of thinking, will clip angels' wings, conquer all mysteries by rule and line, empty the haunted air, and unweave a rainbow. What is the sense of unweaving a rainbow? If you look at a rainbow from a very materialistic standpoint, what is a rainbow? It's just a bunch of atoms that are there that reflect light in a certain way, and the photons come from the atoms there and hit the atoms in your retina and create some sensations in your brain. That's a perfectly accurate materialistic way of looking at the rainbow. But what is missed here is the opportunity for transcendence. When we look at a rainbow from this purely materialistic standpoint, the rainbow just becomes a bunch of atoms interacting with each other in interesting ways. Rather, when we look at a rainbow from a transcendent standpoint, it's a thing of beauty that draws us from our preoccupations into a bigger world that is out there. So that's the aspect of poetic temperament, this ability for wonder, the sensitivity to transcendence that is blocked by this cold philosophy or this materialistic world. And that is what is happening at Trantor, where the materialism of the world gets in the way of people's ability for transcendence. And even if they try to come up, they're very nervous about it. Gerald says this. He says, Trantorians never come up here, though. They don't like it. It gives them the nerves. Why is that? It's because this world of technology has conditioned them in such a way that they cannot have an appreciation for transcendence. And he goes on to explain. He says, if you're born in a cubicle and grow up in a corridor and work in a cell and vacation in a crowded sunroom, then coming up into the open with nothing but the open sky over you might just give you a nervous breakdown. So what he's talking about is that in this Trantorian technology world, where people are enclosed in the space, their ability for transcendence is being cut off, is being stymied by this technological conditioning that they have been through. This reminds me of this project called The Line, which is proposed in Saudi Arabia. It's a 100-mile building where you live within a building. It's talked about as this futuristic city that is very energy efficient, and it can have 1 million people in it. And it's a space where You don't have to travel for more than 5 minutes because everything is really close by. It's a space that reminded me of this thing of being born in a cubicle and living in the line. And what's interesting about sci-fi is that the good sci-fi writers are prophets that speak about how technology shapes the way we do things and how that shapes who we become. So the question that this brings up is, what kind of people do we want to be, and how do we let or not let technology shape us into the kind of people that we are? Will technology shape us in a way that will affect our poetic sensibilities and ability for transcendence? That is the question this particular scene in the Foundation series poses to us. So what do you think about that? Comment here and let me know what you think about the idea of technology and its ability to limit our poetic sensibilities. Gerald goes on to say, and of course, it doesn't really matter. For the people that are living in Trantor, it doesn't really matter that they're not able to come out because they're just happy down there and they run the empire from there. So he's saying they are able to find happiness just in this enclosed space. So why does it matter? And here is another important part about what happiness is. When you look at happiness, there are two different ways of looking at happiness. One is in the sense of what we call the eudaimonia, which come from Aristotle's philosophy, which is the idea that our happiness is in us going on a journey where we develop virtues that help us to participate in a bigger and transcendent and purposeful and meaningful world out there. And it is in that process of developing that journey and developing those virtues is the space where we find that sense of happiness and contentment. And on the other hand, you have happiness as in positive emotions, which is a modern sense of looking at happiness, which is to say, I watched a great show on Netflix and that made me happy, or I ate some ice cream or that made me happy. I had some beer here and that made me happy. So it's a way of consuming an experience that gives us positive emotions that makes us happy. And this sense of superficial positive emotion kind of happiness is something that Aldous Huxley talks about in the novel The Brave New World, where they have this drug called soma, and if you have a little bit of soma every day, you become happy. That kind of a positive emotion-based happiness has a downside, which is that it gets you stuck in that space of dependency. And when you can't get out of that sense of dependency, it stymies your ability to participate in something that is bigger than who you are. The way Aristotle talks about the sense of eudaimonia as a way to happiness, because all you're looking for is the superficial fleeting emotion and trying to have experiences in which you're just consuming an experience to feel positive emotions, as against trying to go on a journey to participate in that which is transcendent. And when I think about participating in that which is transcendent, the person that comes to my mind is David from the Psalms. In Psalm 8:3, he says, "Look up at the stars and you see the works of God in there." And that is a sense of participating in that transcendent world instead of just consuming an experience enclosed within our own world as a way of finding happiness. So the question that Isaac Asimov's framing of Trantor, especially in this particular scene, is how do we let the technology around us shape the world that we live in? And how does that affect our ability for transcendence and our poetic sensibilities? And in turn, what does that mean? How does that shape what it means to be human? That is the question for today. So let me know on the comment section about what you think about this idea of technology shaping our ability for transcendence and our sensitivity to the poetic in our own lives. How we can retain our sense of poetic even as we use the different tools of technology that are around us without letting the tools of technology shape our way of being. If you like this video, please would love to see you in another video, so please hit subscribe. Until I see you again, goodbye for now.